The silken ribbon, a delicate whisper of azure, lay discarded on the polished mahogany of the Duke's dressing table, a stark, innocent testament to a betrayal so profound it would shatter the very foundations of his meticulously constructed world. It was a ribbon he had seen countless times, adorning the hair of his new Duchess, Lady Eleanor, yet its presence here, amidst a scattering of unfamiliar letters and a miniature portrait he did not recognize, pulsed with an ominous energy. His fingers, usually so steady, trembled as he reached for the portrait, his gaze falling upon the face of a man he knew, a man who was decidedly not him. The cruel truth, a venomous serpent, uncoiled itself in the opulent silence of his chambers, threatening to consume him whole. The Duke of Ashworth, a man accustomed to absolute control, was about to discover that his perfect marriage was a meticulously crafted lie, and the woman he believed to be his devoted wife harbored secrets that would unravel them both. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. I want to know how far it has traveled. Lady Eleanor Beaumont existed within a gilded cage, its bars fashioned from the finest societal expectations and its lock secured by the unyielding hand of her family's dwindling fortune. Her days at Beaumont Hall, a sprawling, albeit slightly faded Georgian estate nestled amidst the rolling hills of Kent, were a tapestry woven with threads of quiet duty and unspoken longing. The morning light, filtering through the tall, arched windows of her bedchamber, would often find her seated at her dressing table, her maid, Bess, meticulously arranging her auburn curls into an elegant coiffure. The scent of lavender and rosewater, Bess's preferred pomade, mingled with the faint, earthy aroma of the damp English countryside wafting in through the open casement. Eleanor would gaze out at the manicured lawns, still dewy with morning mist, and the distant ancient oaks that marked the boundary of their land, a wistful sigh often escaping her lips. Her family, the Beaumonts, though once prominent, now clung precariously to their aristocratic standing. Her father, Lord Beaumont, a man of genial disposition but lamentably poor financial acumen, spent his days poring over ledgers that consistently showed more red ink than black, his brow perpetually furrowed with a worry he tried, unsuccessfully, to conceal. Her mother, Lady Beaumont, a woman of formidable will and an even more formidable sense of propriety, saw Eleanor's beauty and impeccable breeding as their last, best hope for salvation. Eleanor was, in essence, a valuable commodity, destined to be traded for a secure future, a fact she understood with a chilling clarity that belied her gentle demeanor. Her social circle was a predictable constellation of local gentry and visiting London luminaries during the season. There were the perpetually gossiping Mrs. Finch, whose father owned the neighbouring estate, and the boisterous young gentlemen who frequented local hunts, their conversations rarely extending beyond horses and hounds. Eleanor, though always polite and engaging, often found herself yearning for deeper intellectual discourse, a desire rarely satisfied in the drawing rooms of Kent. She devoured books, her small private library, a sanctuary where the words of Austen, Radcliffe, and even the more daring Byron offered fleeting escapes from her predetermined path. The crisp rustle of turning pages, the faint scent of aged paper and leather were her most cherished sensory experiences. The restrictions placed upon a young lady of her standing were myriad and unyielding. Her every movement, every utterance, was scrutinized. She was expected to be accomplished in music, needlework, and polite conversation, but never to express an opinion too strongly or to display an intellect that might intimidate a prospective suitor. Her gowns, though always of the finest silks and muslins, were chosen for their modesty and adherence to current fashion, never for personal expression. The delicate lace at her cuffs, the intricate embroidery on her bodices, were symbols of her station, not her individuality. The rustle of her skirts as she moved through the grand, echoing halls of Beaumont Hall was a constant reminder of the expectations that enveloped her. Then came the Duke of Ashworth. His arrival in their social sphere was akin to a meteor streaking across a quiet night sky. Sudden, brilliant, and utterly captivating, he was everything a duke should be, impossibly handsome, with eyes the color of a winter sky, and a commanding presence that silenced a room. His estates were vast, his lineage ancient, and his wealth beyond measure. He moved with an air of effortless authority, his tailored coats of superfine wool, often in deep blues or charcoals, accentuating his broad shoulders, and his cravats tied with an almost artistic precision. The faint scent of his expensive cologne, a blend of sandalwood and bergamot, would linger in a room long after he had departed, a subtle reminder of his powerful presence. Eleanor, like every other eligible young lady, was presented to him at a particularly stifling assembly in Tunbridge Wells. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax polish, wilting flowers, and the nervous perspiration of hopeful mothers. The orchestra played a lively country dance, but the atmosphere was charged with a palpable tension. When the Duke requested her hand for a quadrille, a ripple of envious whispers spread through the ballroom. His touch, as he led her through the intricate steps, was firm and confident, almost possessive. He spoke little, his gaze intense, assessing. Eleanor, usually composed, felt a strange flutter in her chest, a mixture of apprehension and a nascent, dangerous curiosity. He was not overtly charming, but his quiet intensity held a certain allure, a promise of power and protection. She found herself studying the subtle arch of his brow, the firm set of his jaw, the way his dark hair, impeccably styled, caught the candlelight. Over the ensuing weeks, the Duke's attentions became increasingly focused. He called at Beaumont Hall with a regularity that set Lady Beaumont's heart aflutter and Lord Beaumont's shoulders to relax ever so slightly. He would join them for rides through the park, his powerful black stallion a stark contrast to Eleanor's gentle mare. He would sit in their drawing room, sipping tea, his presence filling the space with an almost tangible weight. His conversations with Eleanor were often brief, punctuated by long, appraising silences. He spoke of his estates, his responsibilities, his desire for a suitable duchess to manage his household and provide an heir. There was a practicality to his courtship that left little room for romantic illusion, yet Eleanor, in her quiet moments, found herself weaving fantasies around his formidable figure. She imagined a life of purpose, of shared intellect, of a love that might grow from respect and admiration. She yearned for a partner who would see beyond her beauty, who would value her mind. One crisp autumn afternoon, as they strolled through the meticulously maintained rose gardens of Beaumont Hall, the Duke paused by a particularly vibrant bush of crimson blooms. The air was cool, carrying the faint, sweet scent of decaying leaves and damp earth. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Lady Eleanor," he began, his voice a low, resonant baritone, "I believe you possess all the qualities I seek in a duchess. You are accomplished, intelligent, and of impeccable character. I wish to offer you my hand in marriage." Eleanor's heart gave a sudden, violent lurch. The words, though expected, still struck her with the force of a physical blow. The crimson roses seemed to blur before her eyes. This was it, the culmination of her upbringing, the fulfillment of her parents' hopes, the end of her quiet, solitary dreams. She looked at his imposing figure, at the unwavering certainty in his eyes. There was no passionate declaration, no tender plea, only a statement of fact, a business proposition. Yet a part of her, the part that craved security and a place in the world, felt a strange sense of relief. She imagined the grandeur of Ashworth Manor, the power and influence that would be hers as a duchess. She imagined the quiet satisfaction of managing a vast household, of contributing to something significant. "Your Grace," she replied, her voice a little breathy, "I am honored by your proposal." She curtsied, her gaze falling to the intricate embroidery on her gown, unable to meet his intense stare. The scent of the roses, usually so comforting, now seemed cloying, almost suffocating. He simply nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. "Excellent. I shall speak with your father immediately." He took her hand, his fingers strong and warm, and raised it to his lips, a formal, almost perfunctory gesture. It was a kiss that promised duty, not devotion. As the engagement was formally announced, the congratulations poured in, a torrent of well wishes and thinly veiled envy. Lady Beaumont wept tears of joy, her financial anxieties seemingly banished overnight. Lord Beaumont beamed, his chest puffed out with pride. Eleanor, however, felt a growing unease, a subtle chill that no amount of celebratory champagne or congratulatory remarks could dispel. She was to be the Duchess of Ashworth, mistress of a vast estate, wife to one of the most powerful men in England. Yet, as she lay in her bedchamber that night, the moonlight casting long, spectral shadows across her familiar room, she clutched a single, loose ribbon, a pale blue silk that had come undone from her hair. It felt like a fragile thread, barely holding together the disparate pieces of her future, a future that, despite its glittering promise, felt increasingly like a golden cage. The silence of the night pressed in around her, amplifying the quiet thrum of her own apprehension, a premonition of something yet unknown, something that whispered of a truth far crueler than any she could yet imagine. The engagement ball, held at Ashworth Manor, was intended to be the crowning jewel of the season, a dazzling affirmation of the union between two of England's most distinguished families. The manor itself, a magnificent Palladian edifice of honey-coloured stone, stood illuminated against the twilight sky, its myriad windows glowing like 1,000 watchful eyes. Carriages, emblazoned with crests of every conceivable noble house, lined the sweeping drive, their horses snorting plumes of vapour into the crisp autumn air. The air was alive with the murmur of excited chatter, the rustle of silk and satin, and the distant strains of a string quartet warming up inside. Eleanor, descending the grand staircase on her father's arm, felt a peculiar blend of awe and trepidation. Her gown, a confection of ivory silk and delicate lace, shimmered under the crystal chandeliers, its intricate embroidery catching the light with every graceful movement. A single strand of pearls, a family heirloom, adorned her neck, cool against her skin. Her hair, styled by Bess into an elaborate cascade of curls, was secured with a diamond-studded comb, a gift from the Duke. The scent of orange blossom and jasmine from the fresh floral arrangements that adorned every surface mingled with the heavier perfumes of the assembled guests. The sheer opulence of the scene was breathtaking, almost overwhelming. The ballroom was a kaleidoscope of colour and movement. Hundreds of guests, a veritable who's who of the ton, filled the vast space. There was the formidable Dowager Countess of Grantham, her diamonds sparkling like a constellation, holding court by the fireplace. Lord and Lady Cavendish, known for their scandalous gambling debts, whispered conspiratorially in a corner. The young, dashing Captain Fitzwilliam, recently returned from the Peninsular War, charmed a circle of eager debutantes. Eleanor recognized faces from countless assemblies and soirees, each person a thread in the intricate tapestry of high society. The hum of conversation, a symphony of polite greetings and whispered gossip, filled the cavernous room, punctuated by the occasional peal of laughter. The Duke of Ashworth, resplendent in a dark blue velvet coat and pristine white breeches, stood at the foot of the staircase, his gaze fixed upon Eleanor. As she reached the bottom step, he offered his arm, his touch firm and possessive. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips, a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. He led her through the throng, acknowledging greetings with curt nods, his focus unwavering. Eleanor felt the weight of countless eyes upon them, the silent judgment and envious admiration. She tried to project an air of serene confidence, but a tremor of unease still ran through her. The Duke, for all his outward perfection, remained an enigma, a man whose true thoughts were always carefully guarded. The evening progressed with a meticulously choreographed elegance. There were dances, a sumptuous supper served in the grand dining hall, and endless rounds of polite conversation. Eleanor found herself navigating a labyrinth of social niceties, her hand clasped by countless well-wishers, her ears ringing with effusive compliments. She danced with the Duke, their movements precise and practiced, but devoid of genuine warmth. His hand at her waist felt more like a proprietor's than a lover's. She tried to engage him in conversation about literature, about art, about the social reforms she had read about in her books. But his responses were always brief, dismissive, steering the conversation back to estate management or the weather. He seemed more interested in presenting a united front to society than in truly connecting with her. As the clock neared midnight, the Duke called for silence, his voice cutting through the din of the ballroom with effortless authority. A hush fell over the assembled guests, all eyes turning towards the engaged couple, who stood beneath a magnificent archway of white roses and ivy. The Duke raised a crystal glass, the candlelight glinting off its polished surface. "My dear friends," he began, his voice clear and resonant, "I wish to propose a toast to my future Duchess, Lady Eleanor Beaumont, a woman of grace, beauty, and impeccable breeding, who will, I am certain, bring honor and prosperity to the Ashworth name." Eleanor felt a blush creep up her neck, a mixture of pride and acute discomfort. She offered a small, demure smile, her gaze sweeping across the expectant faces. Her parents, standing proudly near the front, beamed at her. This was her moment, the culmination of everything. But then, a voice sharp and clear cut through the expectant silence. "A toast to the Duchess indeed, but perhaps we should also toast to the truth, Your Grace." All heads swiveled towards the source of the interruption. A woman, dressed in a simple yet elegant gown of deep emerald green, stood near the edge of the ballroom, her dark hair pulled back severely from a face that was pale but determined. Her eyes, dark and flashing, were fixed on the Duke. Eleanor did not recognize her, but there was something in the woman's posture, a fierce defiance, that sent a shiver down her spine. The scent of fear, sharp and metallic, seemed to prickle the air. The Duke's face, usually so impassive, tightened almost imperceptibly. "Madam, I believe you are mistaken. This is a private celebration." His voice was low, laced with a dangerous edge. "Mistaken?" the woman retorted, her voice rising, gaining strength. "I think not, Your Grace, for I am Mary Davies, and I am the mother of your son." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom, a sound like a sudden, violent gust of wind. The music died, leaving an echoing silence. Eleanor felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her, her vision blurred, the opulent room spinning around her. The scent of orange blossom now seemed to mock her, a cruel reminder of the false promise of the evening. Mary Davies, emboldened by the stunned silence, stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "He promised me marriage, Lady Eleanor. He promised me a home for our child. He swore his love, and then he cast me aside for a title and a fortune." Her voice cracked with raw emotion, tears now streaming down her face. "He is a liar and a deceiver, and you, Lady Eleanor, are merely his latest convenience." The Duke, his face now a mask of cold fury, moved towards Mary, his hand outstretched as if to silence her. But it was too late. The words, once spoken, could not be unsaid. The cruel truth, like a venomous serpent, had been unleashed. Eleanor felt a cold dread seep into her bones. The blood drained from her face, leaving her ashen. Her carefully constructed composure shattered into 1,000 pieces. The murmurs began, a rising tide of whispers and shocked exclamations. Faces turned towards her, no longer admiring but pitying, scandalized. She saw her mother's hand fly to her mouth, her father's face contorted in a mixture of rage and mortification. The weight of their disappointment, of their ruined hopes, pressed down on her, suffocating her. Her vision narrowed, focusing on the Duke. His eyes, once so cold and appraising, now held a flicker of something akin to panic, quickly masked by anger. He had known. He had known all along. He had courted her, proposed to her, allowed her to believe in a future built on honor and respect, all while harboring this devastating secret. The golden cage had not only been gilded, but it had been built on a foundation of lies. A wave of nausea washed over her. The air grew thick, suffocating. She could feel the heat of 1,000 stares, the sharp sting of their judgment. The delicate lace of her gown, the shimmering silk, suddenly felt like a shroud. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the polished floorboards, to escape the crushing weight of public humiliation. Without a word, without a glance at the Duke, Eleanor turned. Her movements were stiff, almost mechanical. She pushed through the stunned crowd, ignoring the whispers, the gasps, the outstretched hands of concerned acquaintances. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped within her chest. The grand ballroom, once a symbol of her triumph, now felt like a vast, echoing chamber of shame. She could hear her mother's distressed cry, her father's angry roar, but they seemed distant, muffled by the roaring in her ears. She fled, her ivory gown a stark white blur against the dark wood of the corridors. She ran past bewildered footmen, past startled maids, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The scent of orange blossom, once sweet, now seemed to mock her, a cruel reminder of the false promise of the evening. She reached a side door, fumbled with the latch, and burst out into the cool, damp night. The air, though sharp and biting, was a welcome relief from the suffocating atmosphere within. She ran across the manicured lawns, her delicate slippers sinking into the wet grass, her silk gown catching on unseen branches. She did not know where she was going, only that she had to escape, to find refuge from the cruel truth that had just been so brutally exposed. The Duke's betrayal, a single loose ribbon unraveling her entire world, had left her utterly, irrevocably broken. Eleanor's desperate flight carried her through the moonlit grounds of Ashworth Manor, her breath ragged, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The chill night air, sharp with the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke, offered a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the ballroom. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs ached, her ivory gown now stained with mud and dew, her elaborate coiffure unraveling, strands of auburn hair escaping to whip around her face. She had no destination in mind, only an overwhelming need to be away. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and she collapsed beneath the sheltering boughs of an ancient oak, its gnarled branches a silent witness to her despair. Tears, hot and bitter, streamed down her face, mingling with the cold dew on her cheeks. The image of Mary Davies's tear-streaked face, the Duke's cold fury, and the horrified gasps of the ton replayed endlessly in her mind, a tormenting tableau. It was Bess, her loyal maid, who found her hours later huddled and shivering as dawn began to paint the eastern sky with pale streaks of rose and gold. Bess, a woman of quiet strength and unwavering devotion, wrapped her mistress in a thick cloak, her touch gentle and comforting. "My lady," she whispered, her voice thick with concern, "we must go. Your parents, they are distraught." Eleanor could not face them. Not yet. The shame was too profound, the betrayal too raw. "No, Bess," she managed, her voice hoarse. "Not home. Take me to Aunt Agatha, please. To Bath." Aunt Agatha, Lady Agatha Finch Hatton, was her mother's elder sister, a woman of independent means and an even more independent spirit. She had scandalized society years ago by refusing a suitable match to pursue her passion for botany and intellectual discourse, eventually settling in Bath, a city known for its elegant architecture and its more liberal intellectual atmosphere. Eleanor had always admired her aunt's unconventional choices, finding solace in her sharp wit and discerning mind during their infrequent visits. The journey to Bath was a blur of rattling carriage wheels, hushed conversations with Bess, and Eleanor's own internal turmoil. The landscape outside the carriage window, a patchwork of green fields and sleepy villages, passed by unnoticed. Her mind was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, anger at the Duke's deceit, profound humiliation, and a nascent, terrifying sense of freedom. The golden cage had been shattered, but she was left adrift, exposed. Aunt Agatha's residence, a charming Georgian townhouse on Royal Crescent, was a haven of warmth and quiet elegance. The scent of dried herbs and old books permeated the air, a comforting aroma that spoke of knowledge and tranquility. Aunt Agatha herself, a woman with keen, intelligent eyes that sparkled with life, and a shock of silver hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, greeted Eleanor with a rare, tender embrace. "My dear girl," she said, her voice surprisingly soft. "Come in. You look as though you've seen a ghost." Over cups of strong, fragrant tea, brewed with herbs from her own garden, Eleanor recounted the devastating events of the ball, her voice trembling with residual shock and pain. Aunt Agatha listened patiently, her gaze unwavering, occasionally patting Eleanor's hand with a gnarled, comforting touch. When Eleanor finished, a profound silence settled between them, broken only by the gentle ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall. "The scoundrel!" Aunt Agatha finally declared, her voice laced with a quiet fury. "A man who would betray a woman so callously deserves nothing but contempt. But you, my dear, you are not broken. You are merely unburdened." She offered a small, knowing smile. "This is not the end, Eleanor. It is merely a rather dramatic beginning." Under Aunt Agatha's gentle but firm guidance, Eleanor slowly began to heal. The days were filled with long walks through the picturesque streets of Bath, the honey-coloured stone of the Georgian buildings glowing warmly in the sunlight. The air, often damp from the thermal springs, carried the faint, mineral scent of the waters. They visited the Roman baths, the ancient stones cool and smooth beneath her fingertips, and the pump room, where the gentle murmur of conversation and the clinking of teacups provided a soothing backdrop. Aunt Agatha encouraged her to read, to discuss, to engage her mind. They spent hours in Aunt Agatha's extensive library, the scent of old paper and leather a balm to Eleanor's wounded spirit. Eleanor found herself drawn to works of philosophy, history, and even scientific treatises, subjects rarely deemed suitable for young ladies. Bath society, Eleanor discovered, was a fascinating contrast to the rigid formality of London. While still adhering to certain social graces, it was a place where intellectual pursuits were more openly embraced, where conversations often delved deeper than the latest gossip or fashion. Aunt Agatha, with her sharp intellect and unconventional charm, was a respected figure in these circles, her salon a gathering place for scholars, artists, and independent thinkers. It was at one such gathering that Eleanor first met Alistair Finch. He was a scholar, a quiet man with kind, intelligent eyes behind spectacles and a gentle, unassuming demeanor. He was not handsome in the Duke's commanding way, but his face held an open honesty, a thoughtful intelligence that immediately drew Eleanor's attention. He spoke with a quiet passion about ancient languages and forgotten texts, his voice soft but clear, his hands occasionally gesturing expressively. The scent of parchment and ink seemed to cling to him, a subtle, scholarly aroma. Their initial interactions were tentative, a cautious dance of polite conversation. Alistair, unlike the Duke, listened intently when Eleanor spoke, his gaze warm and encouraging. He asked questions that genuinely sought her opinion, not merely to fill a silence. He spoke of the importance of knowledge, of the beauty of discovery, of the quiet satisfaction of intellectual pursuit. Eleanor found herself opening up to him, sharing her thoughts on the books she had read, her observations on society, her nascent ideas about the world. She felt a lightness in his presence, a sense of being truly seen and heard, a sensation she had rarely experienced with the Duke. One afternoon, they found themselves alone in Aunt Agatha's garden, a riot of late-blooming roses and fragrant herbs. The air was warm, buzzing with the lazy hum of bees. Alistair was examining a rare species of fern Aunt Agatha had cultivated. "Lady Eleanor," he began, his voice soft, "I confess, I find your insights on the works of Mr. Locke quite refreshing. It is rare to encounter a lady with such a keen philosophical mind. Eleanor felt a blush warm her cheeks, but it was a blush of pleasure, not embarrassment. "You are too kind, Mr. Finch. I merely enjoy the challenge of thought." She plucked a fragrant sprig of rosemary, crushing it gently between her fingers, releasing its pungent, invigorating scent. "Indeed," he replied, turning to her, a gentle smile on his face. "And a challenge it is, but a rewarding one, I believe. To truly engage with ideas, to question, to explore, that is a freedom few truly embrace." His gaze met hers, and in his eyes she saw not pity, but respect, and something more, something akin to admiration. Over the following weeks their conversations deepened. They explored the city together, visiting libraries and art galleries, their discussions ranging from the merits of classical architecture to the latest scientific discoveries. Eleanor found herself laughing more freely, her spirit slowly reawakening. She began to dress with a renewed sense of purpose, choosing gowns of soft blues and greens that complemented her eyes, her hair styled with a simpler elegance. She was no longer merely surviving, she was beginning to thrive. The quiet whispers of change within her had grown into a steady, confident hum. One evening, at a small musical soiree hosted by Aunt Agatha, Eleanor played a delicate sonata on the pianoforte, her fingers dancing across the keys with a newfound expressiveness. The music, a melancholic yet hopeful melody, filled the drawing room, its notes echoing softly against the polished wood and velvet furnishings. When she finished, a gentle applause filled the room. Alistair, who had been standing quietly by the window, his silhouette framed by the twilight glow, approached her. "That was exquisite, Lady Eleanor," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes shining with genuine appreciation. "You poured your very soul into that music." Eleanor looked up at him, a warmth spreading through her chest. The scent of beeswax and old books, mingled with the faint perfume of the ladies present, seemed to coalesce into a comforting embrace. "Thank you, Mr. Finch," she replied, her voice soft. "I felt free." He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before gently taking hers. His touch was light, respectful, yet it sent a jolt of unexpected warmth through her. "Freedom," he murmured, his gaze holding hers, "is a precious thing. And you, Lady Eleanor, are destined to embrace it fully." In that moment, amidst the gentle strains of fading music and the quiet hum of conversation, Eleanor felt a profound shift within her. The shattered pieces of her past were beginning to reassemble, not into the golden cage she had known, but into something entirely new, something stronger and infinitely more authentic. The path ahead, though still uncertain, no longer felt daunting, but filled with the promise of her own choosing. The decision to return to London, to face the society that had witnessed her public humiliation, was not made lightly. It was a choice born of Eleanor's newfound strength, nurtured by Aunt Agatha's wisdom and Alistair's quiet encouragement. "You cannot hide forever, my dear," Aunt Agatha had advised, her voice firm but kind. "Your reputation may have been tarnished by a scoundrel, but your character remains unblemished. To retreat is to allow him the final victory. To return, with your head held high, is to reclaim your narrative." Eleanor spent weeks preparing for her re-entry into the formidable arena of high society. Her wardrobe, once a collection of demure silks and muslins, was updated with a subtle sophistication. She chose rich jewel tones, emerald green, sapphire blue, deep amethyst, that accentuated her auburn hair and luminous eyes. Her gowns, though still modest, featured elegant drapes and intricate detailing that spoke of refined taste rather than ostentation. Bess, her loyal maid, now worked with a renewed sense of purpose, her fingers flying as she styled Eleanor's hair into more modern, yet still graceful, arrangements. The scent of new fabrics and fresh lavender filled her temporary London lodgings, a small but elegant townhouse Aunt Agatha had secured. The chosen event for her resurgence was the annual Royal Academy Summer Exhibition, a grand cultural affair that drew the crème de la crème of the ton. The air inside Burlington House was thick with the scent of oil paint, beeswax, and the myriad perfumes of the assembled gentry. The walls were adorned with a dizzying array of portraits, landscapes, and historical scenes, each vying for attention. The hum of conversation, a sophisticated blend of artistic critique and social gossip, filled the vast galleries. Eleanor entered on Aunt Agatha's arm, her heart thrumming a nervous rhythm against her ribs. Yet her posture was erect, her gaze steady. She wore a gown of deep sapphire silk, its simple elegance drawing admiring glances. Her hair was swept up, adorned with a single delicate silver comb, a gift from Aunt Agatha. Alistair Finch, looking distinguished in a well-tailored dark coat, joined them shortly after, his presence a quiet anchor in the swirling social currents. It was not long before they encountered the Duke of Ashworth. He stood near a large portrait of a naval battle, surrounded by a small coterie of his usual admirers, the sycophantic Lord Harrington, the perpetually simpering Lady Beatrice, and a few other members of his inner circle. He looked as imposing and impeccably dressed as ever, his dark blue coat accentuating his broad shoulders, his cravat tied with its customary precision. The faint scent of his expensive cologne, a familiar and now unsettling aroma, reached Eleanor even before he turned. His eyes, cold and assessing, met hers across the crowded gallery. A flicker of surprise quickly crossed his face. He had clearly not expected her to return, much less with such an air of quiet confidence. Eleanor met his gaze unflinchingly, a subtle challenge in her own eyes. "Lady Eleanor," he said, his voice smooth, devoid of any genuine warmth as he approached them, his retinue trailing behind him. "I am surprised to see you here. I had understood you were indisposed." The implication was clear. She should have remained in seclusion, nursing her shame. Eleanor offered a small, cool smile. "Your Grace, I assure you, I am perfectly disposed, and quite recovered from certain unpleasantries." Her voice was steady, betraying none of the internal tremor she felt. The scent of oil paint and old canvas seemed to intensify around them, creating a dramatic backdrop for their confrontation. Alistair stepped forward slightly, placing a reassuring hand on Eleanor's arm. "Indeed, Your Grace," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Lady Eleanor has found her time in Bath to be most invigorating, intellectually and otherwise." The Duke's gaze flickered to Alistair, a hint of disdain in his eyes. "Ah, Mr. Finch, still pursuing your dusty tomes, I presume." "And finding great satisfaction in them, Your Grace," Alistair replied, his tone even. "Perhaps more satisfaction than some find in other pursuits." Udit, the subtle barb, hung in the air, a quiet challenge to the Duke's own questionable conduct. A tense silence descended, broken only by the distant murmur of other conversations. Lady Beatrice, ever the Duke's loyal admirer, let out a nervous titter. The Duke's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. He was not accustomed to being challenged, especially not by a mere scholar. Eleanor, seizing the moment, turned her attention to a nearby painting, a vibrant landscape. "Aunt Agatha, Mr. Finch, do observe the brushwork in this Turner. The way he captures the light is simply breathtaking, don't you agree?" She deliberately excluded the Duke from her conversation, effectively dismissing him. The Duke, clearly discomfited by her composure and Alistair's quiet defiance, offered a curt nod and retreated with his entourage. His retreat a small but significant victory for Eleanor. Throughout the evening, Eleanor found herself navigating similar encounters. Some ladies offered effusive, if slightly insincere, congratulations on her recovery. Others, particularly those who had once envied her engagement to the Duke, now regarded her with a mixture of pity and smug satisfaction. But Eleanor, armed with her newfound confidence, met each gaze, each whispered comment with a serene dignity that disarmed her detractors. She engaged in lively discussions about art and literature, her intellect shining, drawing the attention of several influential patrons and scholars. Alistair remained steadfastly by her side, his presence a quiet testament to their growing connection. He did not overshadow her, but rather complimented her, his thoughtful observations adding depth to their conversations. He spoke of her intelligence, her resilience, her genuine kindness to anyone who would listen, subtly reshaping the narrative around her. The scent of his scholarly presence, a comforting blend of ink and old paper, became a familiar and welcome aroma. The Duke, meanwhile, watched her from across the room, his expression growing increasingly troubled. He saw the genuine smiles she exchanged with Alistair, the easy camaraderie between them. He saw the respect in the eyes of the scholars who gathered around her. He saw a woman transformed, no longer the demure, somewhat naive girl he had proposed to, but a woman of substance and spirit. The realization that he had not only lost a suitable duchess, but had also misjudged her entirely, began to dawn on him. He had sought a beautiful ornament for his arm, a manager for his household, and had cast aside a woman of true worth. The bitter taste of regret, sharp and acrid, began to settle in his mouth. Later in the evening, as the crowds began to thin, Eleanor and Alistair found themselves in a quieter corner of the gallery, admiring a delicate miniature portrait. The soft glow of the gaslights cast a warm, intimate light around them. The air was still, carrying the faint, lingering scent of flowers and old wood. "You were magnificent tonight, Lady Eleanor," Alistair said, his voice low, his gaze fixed on her. "You faced them all with such courage." Eleanor smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "I could not have done it without you, Mr. Finch. Your presence, it gave me strength." He took her hand, his touch gentle but firm, his thumb tracing the delicate veins on her wrist. "Eleanor," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I know this is perhaps not the most conventional of settings, nor the most opportune of times, but I find I can no longer keep silent." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I have come to admire you beyond measure. Your intellect, your spirit, your kindness, they are qualities I cherish above all else. I know your past has been difficult, but I offer you a future built on respect, on shared passions, on genuine affection. Lady Eleanor, will you do me the immense honor of becoming my wife?" Eleanor's heart soared, a joyous, triumphant beat. This was not a business proposition, not a duty, but a heartfelt plea, a promise of true partnership. She looked into his kind, intelligent eyes, seeing there a depth of feeling that had been utterly absent in the Duke's gaze. The scent of the gallery, of art and history, now seemed imbued with the sweet fragrance of hope. "Alistair," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." He brought her hand to his lips, not with the perfunctory formality of the Duke, but with a tender reverence that sent a shiver of pure joy through her. The world, which had once seemed so bleak and predetermined, now stretched before her, vibrant and full of possibility. She had chosen her own path, not one dictated by societal expectations or family fortune, but one guided by her heart and her intellect. The Duke's betrayal, once a source of crushing shame, had inadvertently set her free, allowing her to find a love far more profound and authentic than any she could have imagined within the confines of her golden cage. The announcement of Lady Eleanor Beaumont's engagement to Mr. Alistair Finch sent a fresh ripple of shockwaves through London society, eclipsing even the lingering scandal of her broken engagement to the Duke of Ashworth. The ton, ever hungry for novelty and gossip, was divided. Some whispered of Eleanor's audacity, her brazen disregard for convention, marrying a mere scholar after having been nearly a duchess. Others, particularly the more progressive and intellectual circles, applauded her courage and celebrated her choice, seeing it as a triumph of character over circumstance. Aunt Agatha, of course, was delighted, her eyes sparkling with a mischievous satisfaction. "Let them talk, my dear," she declared, sipping her morning tea. "Their opinions are as fleeting as the morning mist. Your happiness, however, is eternal." Eleanor found herself enveloped in a whirlwind of wedding preparations, a stark contrast to the somber, duty-bound arrangements for her previous engagement. This time, every decision, from the delicate lace for her gown to the selection of flowers for the small, intimate ceremony, was made with joy and genuine anticipation. She chose a gown of soft, flowing silk, a shade of cream that seemed to capture the light, adorned with intricate embroidery of wildflowers, a subtle nod to her love of nature and her aunt's botanical pursuits. Bess, her maid, worked with a cheerful diligence, humming softly as she stitched and pressed, sharing in her mistress's happiness. The scent of fresh linen, new lace, and the faint, sweet aroma of orange blossom from the bridal preparations filled their London lodgings. One crisp autumn afternoon, a week before the wedding, a formal request arrived from the Duke of Ashworth, seeking a private audience with Lady Eleanor. Her heart gave a small, involuntary flutter, a ghost of old anxieties. Aunt Agatha, observing her niece's hesitation, placed a comforting hand on her arm. "You are not obligated to see him, my dear, but perhaps it is an opportunity for closure, for you, not for him." Eleanor, fortified by her newfound strength, agreed. The meeting took place in a quiet, unused drawing room at Aunt Agatha's London townhouse. The room was sparsely furnished, its windows overlooking a small enclosed garden where autumn leaves drifted lazily to the ground. The air was cool, carrying the faint, earthy scent of damp soil. The Duke entered, his imposing figure filling the doorway. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored coat, but his usual air of effortless authority seemed subtly diminished. His eyes, though still piercing, held a flicker of something Eleanor had not seen before. A weariness, a hint of regret. The faint scent of his expensive cologne, once a symbol of power, now seemed to carry a note of melancholy. "Lady Eleanor," he began, his voice a low, resonant baritone, but lacking its usual commanding edge. He did not offer his hand, merely inclined his head in a formal bow. "Your Grace," Eleanor replied, her voice steady, her posture composed. She remained standing, facing him across the polished expanse of the room. I wish to offer my congratulations on your engagement," he said, the words sounding stiff, almost forced. "And my apologies for the manner in which our own engagement concluded. It was regrettable." Eleanor met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Regrettable, Your Grace, is a rather mild term for public humiliation and profound deceit." Her voice was calm, devoid of anger, which seemed to disarm him more than any outburst could have. He flinched, his jaw tightening. "Indeed, I acted poorly. I was under considerable pressure to secure a suitable match, and I allowed my judgment to be clouded. I believed you would be a dutiful wife, and that was all that mattered." He paused, his gaze falling to the intricate pattern on the Persian rug beneath his feet. "I did not consider your feelings, or your worth beyond your suitability." Eleanor observed him, a strange mix of pity and detachment washing over her. He seemed smaller somehow, stripped of his usual arrogance. "And Mary Davies?" she asked, her voice soft. "What of her and your son?" The Duke sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "I have made provisions for them. A cottage on one of my distant estates, a generous allowance. He is my son, and I will acknowledge him, though not publicly. It is a complicated matter." He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "I confess, Eleanor, I believed I was doing what was necessary, what was expected. I never considered that there might be another way, or that I might lose something truly valuable in the process." "You lost nothing, Your Grace," Eleanor stated, her voice firm. "You merely revealed your true character, and in doing so, you inadvertently set me free." She saw a flicker of pain in his eyes, a dawning realization of the depth of his mistake. He had sought a docile, ornamental wife, and in his pursuit he had cast aside a woman who possessed intellect, spirit, and a capacity for genuine love, qualities he now seemed to recognize, perhaps too late. The scent of his expensive cologne, once so alluring, now seemed to carry a faint, almost imperceptible note of loneliness. "I see that now," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You have found happiness, Lady Eleanor. A happiness I fear I may never know." He looked around the quiet room, at the fading light filtering through the garden window, a profound melancholy settling upon him. My life is one of duty, of expectation. I have everything, and yet I feel as though I have nothing. Eleanor felt a pang of genuine sympathy. He was trapped in his own golden cage, one of his own making. "Happiness, your grace," she said softly, "is not found in titles or fortunes, but in choosing a path that aligns with one's true self. I wish you peace." He nodded, a curt, almost defeated gesture. "And I, you, Lady Eleanor. May your marriage be everything mine was not." With that, he turned and left, his footsteps echoing softly down the hall, leaving behind only the faint, lingering scent of his cologne and the quiet hum of Eleanor's own thoughts. She realized then that his unhappiness was not her burden, but a consequence of his own choices. She had found her freedom. He remained imprisoned by his. The farewells to her family were bittersweet. Her parents, though still somewhat bewildered by her unconventional choice, had come to accept it, seeing the genuine happiness that radiated from her. Lady Beaumont, ever practical, had ensured her trousseau was impeccable, a collection of fine linens, delicate nightgowns, and practical day dresses, all chosen with a loving hand. Lord Beaumont, his financial worries eased by a generous settlement from the Duke, a final unspoken apology, embraced her tightly. "Be happy, my dear girl," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "That is all that truly matters." The journey to their new home, a charming, modest cottage near Cambridge, where Alistair held a position at the university, was filled with a quiet joy. The carriage, though not as grand as the Duke's, felt infinitely more comfortable, more intimate. Alistair sat beside her, his hand clasped in hers, pointing out landmarks, sharing anecdotes about his work, his eyes alight with enthusiasm. The landscape, a gentle tapestry of rolling fields and ancient university towns, seemed to welcome her. The scent of fresh hay, damp earth, and the faint scholarly aroma of Alistair's presence filled the carriage, a comforting blend. As they approached their new home, a small, ivy-clad cottage nestled amidst a cluster of ancient trees, Eleanor felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. It was not a grand estate, but it was theirs. It was a home chosen not for status or wealth, but for love, for shared intellect, for a life of purpose. She looked at Alistair, his profile illuminated by the setting sun, and a wave of gratitude washed over her. The single loose ribbon, once a symbol of her unraveling, now felt like a thread woven into a beautiful, intricate tapestry, a tapestry of her own design. She was no longer a commodity, no longer a pawn in a societal game. She was Eleanor, a woman on the cusp of a new life, a life she had chosen, freely and with an open heart. The future, once a terrifying unknown, now beckoned with the promise of intellectual adventure, quiet contentment, and a love that was truly her own. Months later, the ivy-clad cottage near Cambridge had truly become Eleanor's sanctuary, a vibrant testament to a life chosen, not imposed. The scent of Alistair's pipe tobacco mingled with the earthy aroma of her own small herb garden, and the comforting smell of old books now defined her home. Her days were a rich tapestry woven with intellectual pursuits, domestic contentment, and a profound sense of purpose. She no longer woke with a wistful sigh, but with a quiet eagerness for the day's possibilities. Her partnership with Alistair was everything she had dreamed of, and more. Their mornings often began in their shared study, a cozy room lined with overflowing bookshelves, the air thick with the scent of parchment and ink. Alistair, engrossed in his ancient texts, would occasionally read aloud a passage, his voice a low, melodic hum, inviting Eleanor's commentary. She, in turn, assisted him with his scholarly work, her keen intellect proving invaluable in deciphering obscure manuscripts and organizing complex research. She found immense satisfaction in the quiet thrill of intellectual discovery, the meticulous process of uncovering forgotten histories and languages. The scratch of their quills on paper, the rustle of turning pages, were the constant, comforting soundtrack to their shared endeavors. Eleanor also cultivated her own intellectual interests. She delved into the burgeoning field of natural history, inspired by Aunt Agatha's passion for botany. Her small garden, once a neglected patch, now flourished under her care, a riot of colourful blooms and fragrant herbs. She spent hours there, her hands in the rich, dark soil, the earthy scent a grounding presence. She corresponded with other female scholars, a growing network of intelligent women who, like her, sought to expand their minds beyond the confines of traditional domesticity. She even began to write short essays on social reform, anonymously published in progressive journals, advocating for education for women and the poor. The quiet act of putting her thoughts to paper, of contributing to a larger discourse, filled her with a deep sense of fulfillment. Their evenings were often spent in quiet conversation by the crackling fire, the flickering light dancing across their faces. Alistair would read poetry aloud, his voice imbued with a gentle passion, or they would discuss the day's events, their thoughts intertwining with an effortless ease. Sometimes they would host small, intimate gatherings of Alistair's university colleagues and their wives, the cottage filled with lively debate and the warm glow of camaraderie. Eleanor, once reserved, now engaged in these discussions with a confident grace, her opinions valued and respected. The clinking of teacups, the murmur of intelligent conversation, and the scent of roasted chestnuts from the hearth created an atmosphere of genuine warmth and intellectual stimulation. News of the Duke of Ashworth occasionally reached them through Aunt Agatha's letters, or through the discreet whispers of society. His life, it seemed, had continued much as before, a relentless cycle of duty and expectation. He had eventually taken another duchess, a young woman of impeccable lineage but little spirit, chosen, no doubt, for her suitability rather than any genuine affection. The marriage was said to be a cold, formal affair, producing an heir but little joy. He remained a powerful figure, respected and feared, but whispers of his increasing isolation, his perpetual air of melancholy, sometimes surfaced. He had everything society deemed desirable, yet he remained trapped, a prisoner of his own choices, forever haunted by the ghost of what he had so carelessly discarded. The faint, lingering scent of his expensive cologne, Eleanor imagined, now carried only the bitter aroma of regret. Eleanor, however, felt no malice, only a quiet understanding. Her journey had taught her that true happiness lay not in external validation or societal approval, but in the cultivation of one's inner world, in the pursuit of knowledge, and in the embrace of authentic connection. She had bloomed where she was planted, transforming the barren ground of betrayal into a fertile garden of self-discovery and purpose. One bright spring morning, as she sat in her garden, sketching a particularly vibrant rose, Alistair joined her, a gentle smile on his face. The air was soft, fragrant with the scent of new blossoms and damp earth. He sat beside her, his hand gently covering hers. "You are truly happy, aren't you, my love?" he asked, his voice soft, his eyes filled with adoration. Eleanor looked up at him, her heart overflowing with gratitude. "More than I ever dared to dream, Alistair. I have found my true home, not in a grand estate, but here with you, in a life of shared purpose and genuine affection." She gestured around her at the flourishing garden, at the quiet cottage, at the distant spires of the university. "The Duke's betrayal, once the source of my deepest shame, became the catalyst for my greatest freedom. He sought to cage me, but instead he set me free to find my own wings." She thought of the single loose ribbon, once a symbol of her unraveling, now a distant memory. Her life was no longer a fragile thread, but a strong, vibrant tapestry, woven with threads of intellect, love, and self-determination. She had learned that the cruelest truths could sometimes lead to the most profound liberations, and that the greatest riches were not found in gold or titles, but in the quiet, enduring beauty of a life authentically lived. The sun warmed her face, the gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and Eleanor, The Duchess who never was, smiled, truly and completely content. She had found her own kingdom, and it was far more precious than any ducal estate. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. I want to know how far it has traveled.